The candlelight flickers gently across stone walls, the color of soft bread crust. You are somewhere deep in the folds of the countryside, in a century that doesn't care much for exact dates, and a convent that seems stitched together by silence and ivy. It smells faintly of thyme and old parchment, and maybe if you inhale deeply enough, a touch of cloves warmed in goat's milk. The night wraps itself tightly around the cloister. You're not sure how you got here, but your shoes are off, your shoulders are lighter, and no one has asked you any difficult questions in hours. A gentle warning, though, you probably won't make it through this day. Not because anything dramatic happens, but because time behaves a little oddly here. It stretches, curls, naps in doorways. Clocks are not exactly welcome. Before we begin our gentle tumble into the past, feel free to like this video if your eyes are already half closed, and leave a comment below. Where are you watching from, and what time is it where you are? We're quietly collecting whispers from all over the world. Now let's ease into tonight's journey. You walk slowly barefoot across cold flagstone. The texture under your feet is a quiet kind of ancient, like someone's memory that never got dusty. The sound of your steps echoes between cloistered arches where vines creep up as if they too are trying to hear what's being whispered behind wooden doors. A bell chimes softly somewhere behind you, one of those shy bells that sounds more like a sigh than a summons. You follow it not because you're told to, but because it feels like the kind of bell that knows things. Up ahead, a small garden opens beneath a pale moon, and this is where the nuns come to gather herbs, only they're not gathering tonight. They're listening. A few figures in long woolen habits sit in the dirt, as if the time itself were about to confess something sacred. You feel silly for wearing your regular clothes. Woolen robes apparently are the dress code for those who want to speak to plants. There's Sister Radegund, holding a bundle of rosemary tied with red thread. She's humming not a song exactly, more like the rhythm of the wind when it gets lost in tall grass. It's oddly familiar. The others just sit, hands open in their laps, palms up like bowls ready to receive the invisible. One of the nuns stands and drifts toward a stone basin at the edge of the courtyard. She places something inside a wax-sealed bottle carved with symbols that wouldn't look out of place in a geometry student's daydream. You can't read them, but they feel serious. This convent, you're told, without words. Of course, everyone here communicates in shrugs and infusions as part of the Benedictine order. But not just any part. This group was once known as the Time Sisters. Not officially. The church would have frowned at that. But the locals whispered it with both fear and fondness. Here's your first major historical fact for the evening, tucked gently between warm hands. Many medieval nunneries were centers of botanical knowledge. They kept gardens not just for food or beauty, but for medicine and occasionally for things that looked suspiciously like magic. Some manuscripts attributed to convents include recipes not found in any other medical texts of the time. One obscure tidbit: there was a Benedictine sister in the 12th century who claimed that nettle leaves, if harvested under a full moon while barefoot and angry, could delay aging. Historians still debate whether she was joking. You take a seat on a low bench worn smooth by centuries of waiting. Someone hands you a warm mug of something that smells like drowsiness and cracked cinnamon. No one tells you what's in it. That's part of the fun. Overhead stars begin to emerge like tiny holes poked in the night. The garden seems to breathe with you, and a chill wraps itself gently around your ankles like a polite cat made of air. From across the courtyard, Sister Radegund murmurs a phrase that drips with ritual. The moon's turning thick tonight. No one reacts, but they all seem to exhale at once. You look down into your mug. It's glowing faintly. That's probably fine. Time here doesn't so much pass as it pauses, stretches, and folds like linen. Conversations begin, but don't end. A story starts and you realize it might have begun last week, or it might still be beginning. The nuns don't care. They live on herb time. You glance at the wall where a sundial would be. Instead, there's just a faded mural of a woman holding a drooping flower. No clock, no hourglass. Just her staring vaguely at the horizon as if she too is waiting for tea. You sip and the world blinks slower. The next morning, or perhaps it's the same night still wearing different shoes, you wake in a small cell. Not the cold kind. This one is all curves and quilts and smells like beeswax and eucalyptus. A single window filters in butter-colored light, and somewhere outside a bird is giving a sermon on patience. You stretch slowly, unsure how long you've slept, or whether sleep is even a concept that applies anymore. The mug from last night is gone, replaced with a small bowl of dried fruit and a folded note that reads, "For clarity, chew slowly." You do. It tastes like pears that once dreamed of being wine. Outside the cloister is humming. Not with voices, no one's much for conversation here, but with movement, small, purposeful shuffles. The kind of pace only achieved by people who have nowhere urgent to be, and everything sacred to tend. You wander past the apothecary where the door hangs slightly open. Inside, rows of glass bottles line the walls like tiny stained glass windows. Each one contains something with a name that sounds like it could be a saint or a sin. Angelica root, wormwood, belladonna dream seed. A nun, you think her name might be Sister Elfrida, turns and nods at you. Her hands are stained green at the tips like she's been scolding the herbs back into obedience. She gestures for you to come closer and points to a small vial filled with golden liquid. She mouths the word time. You nod because what else does one do in the presence of bottled time? Here's your second historical fact to gently tuck under your pillow. Medieval convents often served as unofficial pharmacies for their communities. The sisters recorded botanical recipes, sometimes blending ancient Roman texts with local oral traditions, creating potions both medicinal and mystical. They were especially known for concoctions to soothe melancholy, aid fertility, or induce what they delicately called visions. An obscure tidbit to stir into your tea, some convents forbade mirrors not out of vanity, but because they believed reflections could invite spirits. Instead, they polished obsidian or copper to a cloudy finish just enough to check if your veil was straight, without accidentally glimpsing the beyond. Historians still debate whether some of these potions were truly medicinal or intended for spiritual suspension, a kind of pause button for the soul you overhear from a novice translating a scroll with one hand and feeding a squirrel with the other. You follow the hallway deeper into the stone belly of the convent. It curves in a way that shouldn't be architecturally possible, and yet it feels right. You enter what appears to be a workshop lit entirely by hanging candles in glass globes. The light dances across pages filled with careful ink charts, prayers, diagrams shaped like moons unraveling. In the center, a large basin carved from what might be meteorite, or a particularly dramatic rock. Around it are bowls of lavender mint calendula, and something that looks suspiciously like crushed sapphire. The air smells like sleepwalking. Sister Elfrida joins you. She opens a worn book and begins to stir the mixture in the basin with a wand that looks like it used to be part of a violin. You half expect music. Instead, the surface of the basin begins to shimmer. She dips a ladle into the liquid and pours it into a shallow dish. The reflection inside doesn't show the ceiling. It shows a memory. Yours, or someone's. A little girl with mud-stained socks and a pocket full of feathers. She's laughing at a joke no one remembers. You blink and it's gone. The potion is for remembering things that haven't happened yet, or forgetting things so they can bloom again. You're not sure which. Time here continues its strange ritual of barely existing. You sit again. That seems to be your primary activity here. Sitting, watching, forgetting what you were waiting for. Outside, the evening is beginning to wrap itself in indigo. And so the day folds softly into the next without needing your permission. The evening, which might also be mid-morning, dressed in twilight's robes, arrives with a hush. You are back in the garden, though you don't remember walking there. A bench cradles your spine. Somewhere nearby, an oil lamp flickers with the determination of someone trying to stay awake through a philosophy lecture. A cloaked figure steps out from behind a trellis, holding a small brass bell. She wears no shoes. Her feet are stained with earth, and her hands carry the calm of someone who waters plants with prayers. Sister Ismaria, they call her. Or maybe that's just what the dandelions whisper when she walks past. She gives the bell a gentle shake. Not to announce anything, but simply to let time know it's being watched. You begin to realize something. This isn't about freezing time or bending it. It's about softening it. Like warming wax with your palm until it no longer resists your thumbprint. Here's your third major historical fact in some medieval convents. The canonical hours matins lauds prime terce sext. Nun vespers and compline divided the day into spiritual beats. But some communities, particularly isolated ones, interpreted these hours more intuitively, aligning them with changes in birdsong, shadow lengths, or the scent of damp soil. It wasn't about the clock. It was about rhythm. Obscure, cultural tidbit. Some cloistered nuns used astrological charts to determine when to plant herbs for maximum potency. Mercury's mood swings were consulted for mint harvests. Venus was blamed when the rose hips soured. And the moon, well, she was the head mistress of everything. Historians still debate whether the dreaming hour mentioned in 3 preserved convent texts was a sanctioned period of nap-based visions, or just a poetic excuse to sleep through the 4th psalm. Tonight the sisters are preparing a brew, not for healing or dreaming, but for slowing. It's a potion of patience. Ingredients: steeped valerian root, wind-dried lemon balm, starlit verbena, and a single hair from the oldest sister in residence. Don't ask where that last part came from. The rules here are written in metaphor. You're invited to help stir. The spoon is heavier than you expect. Carved from a cherry branch felled by lightning, it feels like holding a quiet revolution. As you circle the spoon through the mixture, it begins to swirl, not in a spiral, but in soft pulses. Like breath, like a lullaby with no lyrics. Sister Ismaria nods and whispers, "Let it simmer. Let it sing." You glance up and notice several nuns sitting beneath an old fig tree. Their eyes are closed, their hands resting lightly over their hearts, fingers twitching in slow patterns, as if playing invisible harps. It's a prayer, maybe, or knitting for ghosts. You sit near them, the potion behind you humming gently in its cauldron. Time once again folds its arms and leans against a tree to wait. It seems in no rush either. From the distance, an owl begins its haunting chorus. One note, then silence, then another. Like punctuation marks for a story you're too drowsy to follow. And just like that, without ceremony or alarm, the stars blink in. 1,000 tiny yeses from the sky. You exhale through your nose. The air smells like sleep about to happen. It's morning, probably. The air is cool and smells faintly of lavender tea and fresh parchment. You're sitting on a wooden stool in what must be the convent's scriptorium, although no one calls it that aloud. They call it the listening room. Here ink is sacred. Quills are respected. But silence is the reigning queen. Around you, sisters lean over long sheets of vellum, copying diagrams, symbols, and recipes you don't recognize. Some pages are stained with tears, others with wine. One looks like it's been kissed several times. Sister Theodota, whose glasses are permanently smudged in a way that suggests she likes them better that way, slides a manuscript toward you. It's a recipe, not for food, not for medicine, for stillness. The ingredients are less than helpful. 1 breath caught between thoughts. 3 grains of unsaid truth. 1 spoonful of shadow collected at sunset. Water from a dream remembered clearly. There's no method, just a note at the bottom. Brew under moonlight. Speak only if the cat allows it. You look up. There is, in fact, a cat perched on the windowsill. It stares at you with the unimpressed gaze of someone who's read every footnote in your soul. Time slows again. Or maybe you're just finally keeping up. Here's your 4th historical fact. Many convents were responsible for preserving rare medical texts, not just copying them, but quietly editing, experimenting, and adapting. Women like Hildegard of Bingen wrote visionary medical texts blending science theology and herbal knowledge. These writings often included metaphorical instructions that modern readers interpret as symbolic, ritualistic, or frankly, bewildering. Obscure tidbit. Some of these texts included instructions on how to walk backward with intention as part of purification rituals. The theory being that retracing your steps physically might help untangle spiritual knots. It didn't always work, especially on stairs. Historians still debate whether the sisters' more arcane recipes were metaphors, misunderstood translations, or perhaps most likely private jokes that got way out of hand. In the center of the room sits a stone table smoother than skin. Carved into it is a circular map of the stars of time. No one says, but every hour a single sister walks up to it, places her hand in the center, and waits. She doesn't move. She doesn't speak. After a few minutes, she walks away. You try it. The stone is cool, pulsing faintly under your fingertips. You close your eyes and suddenly remember a night from your childhood. The smell of toast. The feel of someone brushing your hair. A candle flickering as someone whispered a story about a donkey and the moon. You open your eyes. The table is just stone again. Sister Theodota smiles faintly, as though she's seen that happen before. Stone remembers, she murmurs, then returns to her writing. You're handed a fresh scroll. The ink is still wet. It says simply, time doesn't run. It walks. And today it's limping. You laugh quietly. It echoes more than expected. A gentle bell rings. Time for vespers, or lunch, or nap. No one clarifies. You're not expected to be anywhere, but somehow you're exactly where you need to be. Outside, the wind is tugging gently at a tapestry hanging near the doorway. It depicts a woman with closed eyes cradling a son in one hand and a handful of melting snow in the other. Below her feet, written in curling script, to stop time, let it trust you first. You find yourself in the convent's herbarium, though you don't remember arriving. That's becoming a theme. The building is part greenhouse, part apothecary, and part something else, something humming and ancient, like a grandmother who once turned into a willow tree just to teach her children patience. The glass panes above you are stained with time and ivy veins. They bend the sunlight into pale halos that hover over jars, bowls, and sacks labeled in handwriting that alternates between delicate and dangerously chaotic. There's a basket of nettles beside a cushion, embroidered with stars. There's also a pigeon sitting on a shelf, looking vaguely responsible. You're here to learn about potion logic, how certain herbs are paired not by their medical use but by personality. Lavender is quiet and disciplined. Thyme is rebellious and doesn't play well with others. Fennel is dramatic, and chamomile is the one who pretends she's okay even when she isn't. Sister Genoveva, who is barely 5 feet tall, but radiates the energy of someone who has opinions about your entire life, beckons you over to a low wooden table. She's already grinding dried poppy petals with a mortar shaped like a badger's paw. Her sleeves are rolled, her forehead is glistening, and she's humming a melody you recognize but can't place, possibly from a dream you didn't finish. She hands you a root. It looks like it's judging you. This, she says, is sleep's cousin, not the good one, the weird one who shows up at family dinners and makes everyone speak slower. Major historical fact. In medieval monastic life, especially among nuns, herbalism wasn't just practical, it was sacred. They believed plants carried echoes of Eden, each one speaking a language God left for us to decipher. So gardening wasn't a chore, it was a dialogue, and sometimes a debate. Obscure tidbit: some sisters believed basil could only be harvested while wearing blue, and only after telling the plant a secret. The idea was that plants, like people, bloomed better when trusted. Historians still debate whether certain potions to influence time were intended to affect sleep, induce trance states, or serve as poetic metaphors for surrendering to divine will. Honestly, the recipes often read like riddles with no punchline. You help arrange bundles of dried herbs onto an embroidered cloth. Each one is tied with a different color thread. Sister Genoveva says the colors represent the mood of the person who last used them. Apparently, someone was very orange last week. Suddenly, a bell rings, but not a chime, more like a cowbell trying to be delicate. Sister Genoveva grimaces. "The goat's in the manuscripts again," she mutters, and rushes off with surprising speed. You're left alone with the herbs, the pigeon, and the quiet thrill of knowing you don't need to do anything right now. The air smells like lemon balm and dust. The pigeon coos. You stretch out your legs on the warm stone floor and close your eyes just for a second. Time decides not to argue. You're walking through the cloister now, your footsteps soft against the ancient stone. The arches curve above you like someone built a cathedral out of lullabies. Vines with small white flowers curl lazily along the pillars, as if they too have nowhere better to be. A gentle rain has begun. Not enough to wet you, just enough to remind the world that it's still spinning. You pass by a shallow pool where drops make slow, deliberate ripples, the kind of ripples that never seem to reach the edge. A nun in dark robes sits by the fountain, holding a cracked mirror. She turns it slightly and watches the clouds pass through it, like ghosts too shy for full appearances. She doesn't acknowledge you, but her presence feels generous, like someone saving your seat even when you didn't ask. You follow the corridor toward the refectory, where meals are more ritual than sustenance. Today's meal is barley soup, brown bread, and slices of a root vegetable that might have been invented as a joke. The sisters eat quietly, hands folded when not in use. Occasionally someone chuckles, but no one explains why. You're invited to sit beside Sister Aldegundis, who has a laugh like a kettle boiling in reverse. She offers you a spoon and a napkin, embroidered with an owl, who looks personally offended. "Eat slowly," she says. "The carrots are dramatic." Today's historical fact: many medieval convents adhered to dietary restrictions that changed with the liturgical calendar. During long fasts, protein was derived from peas, nuts, and lentils. But in some places, eel was permitted, leading to a lot of creative eel disguises, including eel pie, eel sausage, and eel pretending to be soup. Weird cultural tidbit. Some communities would press edible flowers into wax tablets, then shave the wax into stews during feast days for floral seasoning. Calendula was popular. Lavender was banned after an incident involving a nun who couldn't stop reciting Virgil in Latin for 3 hours straight. Historians still debate whether the silent feasts were truly wordless or simply filled with an approved humming language. One 12th century abbess allegedly issued a decree permitting tuneful throat expression on feast days, though it might have just been a fancy loophole to sing about soup. After lunch, the sisters don't return to chores. Instead, they retreat to the orchard, not to pick anything, just to listen. Trees apparently are better poets than people, especially after rain. You sit beneath a crooked pear tree with bark like dragon scales and close your eyes. You hear nothing and everything. Birds negotiating bees, spelling curses in pollen, the wind reciting gossip between branches. Sister Aldegundis hands you a dried blossom. This one bloomed the moment someone forgave someone else. You don't ask who. Some stories don't belong to words. A soft bell chimes somewhere not to call you away but to remind the afternoon it exists. You stand. The path ahead is damp, quiet, soft, like time folded neatly waiting for your next step. You wake, or maybe you were never quite asleep, inside the scriptorium where parchment dreams are copied over and over until they blur into something sacred. The air here is ink-stained and reverent. Every breath smells like cedar oil and candle wax with a whisper of goat. You don't ask about the goat. You've learned. The room is lit not by windows, but by a constellation of flame-dented candles, arranged like someone was trying to decode the night sky but got distracted halfway through. A sister sits hunched over a manuscript, her quill scratching in rhythm, with the ticking of something not quite a clock. You're shown to a small desk with uneven legs. The chair sighs as you sit. In front of you, a sheet of parchment waits blank but judgmental. A pot of ink trembles beside a small feather quill that looks like it once belonged to a very nervous bird. Today, you're helping illustrate a herbal compendium. Your tasks sketch the root of mandrake. The sister beside you, whose name is either Margaretha or possibly just shh, leans over and whispers, "Don't make it too lifelike." The last one tried to crawl off the page. Major historical fact: mandrake root was deeply feared and revered in medieval herbals. It was thought to scream when uprooted, a scream so powerful it could kill. To harvest it safely, some recommended tying the root to a dog and covering your ears. Unsurprisingly, dogs were not consulted about this. Weird cultural tidbit: some scribes included tiny doodles of animals in the margins to represent their emotional state while copying texts. A stressed scribe might draw a yawning hedgehog, a bored one snails jousting. Historians still debate whether these marginalia were approved by monastic superiors or tolerated under a sort of artistic amnesty. One abbot's journal contains the note, "Another rabbit playing the lute. I refuse to ask why." You spend the next hour drawing herbs, most of which look like anxious spaghetti. Occasionally, you dip your quill too deep in the ink and leave a dramatic blot, like a punctuation mark, to a sentence that hasn't been spoken yet. Sister Margaretha, or shh, gives you a small nod. You realize she hasn't looked at your work, just at your hands. "They remember," she says softly, "even if you don't." You don't know what that means, but it feels true. The candle beside you flickers, bending its flame toward the parchment, as if trying to read your thoughts. The goat enters. Everyone pretends not to notice. By twilight, you find yourself in the infirmary, not because you're ill, but because it's the quietest room in the entire convent. The air smells faintly of rosemary and regret. Beds with uneven quilts line the walls, each one looking like it's had its own slow conversation with time. An elderly sister named Benedicta tends to a tray of dried rose hips and wool-wrapped lavender bundles. She speaks very little, but when she does, it's in syllables that feel embroidered rather than spoken. She motions for you to sit by the window, where the last golden light folds across the floor like honey. There's no one here but the two of you, and maybe a third presence soft and invisible like the feeling of knowing you've left something important in another room. Major historical fact, convent infirmaries often doubled as hospice wards and botanical laboratories. Nuns weren't just caregivers. They were medical researchers learning from Galen Avicenna and local midwives. They charted symptoms, experimented with tinctures, and occasionally got things very, very right. Cultural tidbit. In some communities, nuns would stitch secret prayers into the hem-hums of linen bandages, tiny invisible knots of hope meant to rest directly on the skin. Some believed these knots could speed healing. Others just liked the symmetry. Historians still debate whether the infamous time-stilling draft ever existed. Supposedly administered only to the dying, it was said to pause the passage of time for the patient's soul to prepare for departure. No recipe survives, just a mention in a footnote written in unusually neat handwriting. Sister Benedicta offers you a glass vial. Inside, a clear liquid hums softly as if remembering rain. Don't drink it, she says gently. It's not for now. You nod as if you understand. You don't, of course, but it doesn't matter. She wraps your hand in a strip of linen. It smells of clove and summer, and something deeper, something that smells like forgiveness. You sit there as the sky fades to plum. A candle is lit, not to see by, but to remember that light exists. In the distance, a bell rings once, not for dinner, just for presence. You close your eyes. The convent exhales. So do you. The bell tower doesn't chime again. Instead, it hums. A low, vibrating tone that resonates in your ribs as much as your ears. You follow it not because you must, but because it feels polite. The halls are dim now, lit by wall sconces whose flames lean lazily to one side like they've had a long day and deserve to slouch a little. Your steps bring you to the herb garden. Yes, it's night, and no, that's not particularly practical, but here the nuns do their most important work after dark. Not just praying, but whispering to the roots. Moonlight pours itself generously over the garden paths. You walk among rows of sage, marigold, angelica, and something with a Latin name so long it might count as a sermon. The fig trees are here too. Remember them, they're older than they look. You feel as if they're listening. A sister stands barefoot in the soil. Her name is unknown, but her presence suggests someone who has never needed a name to be obeyed. She holds a small ceramic bowl and murmurs words that sound like water remembering how to fall. Major historical fact: in many medieval convents, night gardens were designed not only for growing, but for quiet ritual. Certain plants were believed to open more fully under moonlight. Calendula, for instance, was thought to speak more clearly after dusk when distractions slept. Cultural tidbit. Some nuns swore that whispering to plants increased potency, a blend of prayer breath and attention. Others insisted this was nonsense, and yet did it anyway. Historians still debate whether these moon-tended herbs had actual chemical differences or whether it was simply the placebo effect with holy water sprinkled on top. You kneel beside a cluster of chamomile. You speak barely above a hush. Not words, really. More like the syllables of kindness. The petals turn slightly. Or maybe it's just the wind. The barefoot sister hands you a small glass bottle stoppered with wax. Inside is a golden liquid that catches moonlight like it's hoarding it. She nods once and you feel you've passed something. Not a test exactly, more like a moment. You leave the garden with hands that smell of thyme and warm soil. Your soul feels mulched and well-tended. By morning, you're in the kitchen again, but this time something's changed. There's a rhythm to it all now. You notice it in the way the spoons clink, the way the bread is scored, the way someone hums the same three-note tune over and over again, until it becomes a kind of edible liturgy. A great iron pot bubbles, not ominously, just persistently, like it has stories to tell, but isn't in a rush. You're tasked with stirring, which sounds simple until you realize it's clockwise for 40 beats, then counterclockwise for 20, then pause for 3, and say a small prayer to Saint Martha, patron of kitchen sanity. You obey. The mixture thickens into something honeyed and strange. Major historical fact: medieval convent kitchens often doubled as experimental laboratories. Recipes weren't just for meals, they were also for poultices, inks, glues, perfumes, and sometimes rather daring cures. There's one surviving document where anise mint and river sand were all used in the same paste, for something called chest quieting. Weird cultural tidbit: some nuns marked favorite recipes by folding the corner of the parchment inward, so no one else would know what they were hiding, unless they peeked. Culinary secrets were sacred. Historians still debate the exact contents of a recipe, referred to only as tincture for turning the hourglass. It appears in 3 convents' records, always with the same closing line: use only at dusk. Speak no word. The rest is maddeningly vague. You pour your mixture into a series of clay molds shaped like fig leaves. The sister beside you whispers, "Time is softest when it smells like this." You're unsure whether she means the ingredients or the moment itself. Steam rises. It curls around your face like the breath of something ancient and gentle. Outside, the bell doesn't ring. It purrs. You sit in the warmth, a spoon still in hand, your fingers sticky with the past. By now, you've stopped expecting explanations. That's probably for the best. The convent has rhythms that defy clocks, and logic is politely discouraged, like garlic at a vampire's tea party. You follow the scent of ink, through a narrow doorway and up a stairwell that sighs with every step you arrive in the scriptorium. It's quieter than silence, the kind of quiet that suggests 1,000 words holding their breath. Here, nuns copy not only scriptures, but also recipes, observations of stars, and a few highly suspicious diagrams involving lunar phases and the temperature of goat's milk. You sit at a wooden desk whose surface feels like it remembers every hand that's written there. In front of you, a quill, a pot of ink the color of dried blood orange rind, and a parchment that whispers if you touch it too hard. You're tasked to copy a phrase 20 times. The phrase changes every hour. Today's line reads, "Time is the servant of the breath." No one explains what that means. It's probably better that way. Major historical fact: medieval nuns were among the most prolific scribes in Europe. Their script was often finer than their male counterparts, and many manuscripts from convents contain marginalia, tiny doodles, floral patterns, or creatures that resemble snails in existential crisis. Obscure tidbit: one manuscript from a German convent included a side note that simply read, "I was cold when I wrote this." It has since become a favorite quote among archivists with cold hands and warmer hearts. Historians still debate whether certain mystical diagrams in nun-authored books were intended as serious cosmology, or simply whimsical metaphors written during long winter nights with too much fennel tea. The sister across from you sneezes once gently. Her quill doesn't stop. You sneeze too, just to be polite. A small inkwell laughs. You look down. The phrase you're copying has somehow written itself 10 times. Perhaps your hand got ahead of your attention, or perhaps time bent slightly out of shape like warm wax. The bell hums again, and you feel the room sigh with you, as if the parchment itself has exhaled. Now the afternoon light filters in like it has secrets, soft, golden, and slanting sideways, as if unsure whether it should commit to being day or just start wrapping up early. You're in the still room now, a quiet chamber filled with bottles, jars, bundles of herbs, and scrolls of crinkled instructions tied with string. It smells like 1,000 apothecaries whispered into the same dream. Sister Marit is here. She's the one with the silvery eyebrows and the voice like baked cinnamon. She hands you a wooden box. Inside are 7 tiny bottles labeled in Latin. You recognize none of the words. That doesn't stop her from expecting you to know exactly what to do. She gestures toward a table where a map is laid out not of land, but of time. Hours drawn like rivers, days like hills, and months like spirals. Pour the 6th bottle at twilight, she says. Only when the breeze moves westward. Otherwise, skip directly to the 2nd. You nod, of course. As if any of this is reasonable. Major historical fact, still rooms in medieval convents functioned as early laboratories, where women preserved medicinal knowledge and experimented with herbal treatments. Perfumes, even rudimentary distillation techniques, centuries before, men gave it names like chemistry. Weird tidbit, some still room instructions included emotional temperature in their recipes, such as, do not prepare while angry or stir only with joy. Whether this influenced results or simply improved morale remains unclear. Historians still debate the purpose of one recipe found in a stillroom journal titled simply, "To Pause the Rain." It involved moth wings, copper flakes, and the recitation of psalms backward. You lift the 7th bottle. Its contents shimmer like sleep caught in a jar. You set it down gently, as instructed. Marit nods. The wind outside shifts. You do not pour anything. Not yet. But you feel a ripple through your thoughts. As if something paused just for a heartbeat. Perhaps the rain. Or perhaps time itself sneezed and forgot what it was doing. A candle flickers on instinct. The still room sighs. You're told your task is done, though you haven't begun. You bow slightly and leave. Evening descends the way a cat does, quietly, deliberately, as if it owned the place all along. Shadows stretch themselves like they've been lounging all day, which, to be fair, they have. You find yourself back in the garden, though it feels like a different world now. The air smells of wet stone and rosemary. One of the older sisters kneels near the basil, whispering to it. You can't quite hear what she says, but the basil looks pleased. You step along the stone path slower now. Slower because the evening asks it of you. Slower because something in your body has finally decided there's no need to rush, not here, not now, not when even the wind seems to walk barefoot. A bell rings from the chapel, not loud, not urgent, just a reminder that it exists, just in case you forgot, as if you could. Major historical fact. Evening rituals in medieval convents often included the singing of Compline, the final prayer service of the day, meant to quiet the soul and prepare for restful sleep. Many believed angels listened more attentively at this hour. Obscure tidbit, some convents believed that plants grown in silence produced stronger remedies. Talking was forbidden in the herb garden during certain moon phases. One nun reportedly communicated only with hand gestures for 40 years, some say by choice. Others say for the peace and quiet. Historians still debate whether the ritual of walking the dusk line was symbolic or functional. Descriptions mention nuns tracing paths through the garden each twilight to smooth the edge between time and dream. You follow the path she once walked. Perhaps you smooth the edge too. The gravel under your feet seems to settle into something more ancient. The fig trees lean slightly, as if eavesdropping. You pause beside the small fountain, the one where Sister Marit once claimed she saw her younger self waving from the ripples. You look, no one waves. Only your own eyes looking back at you, softened by the light. Something stirs in the fig tree behind you. You don't turn. You don't need to. Night has finally committed to the scene. Stars blink like someone is just now remembering where they left them. The convent is quieter than it's been all day, but not still. There's movement under the surface. The kind of movement dreams make before they decide what shape to take. Your lead candle in hand to the apotheca, an arched cellar lined with shelves of tinctures, scrolls, and jars that might contain anything from lavender to regrets. The sister guiding you is new, not new to the convent, new to you. She doesn't speak, but she hums a tune with only 3 notes repeated like a secret. She lights 7 candles in a semicircle and hands you a bowl filled with thick, pearlescent liquid. Stir it, she mouths. You do with the kind of reverence one reserves for soup or sacred rituals, often the same thing. Major historical fact. Apothecaries in religious communities weren't just for medicine. They stored sacred oils, blended perfumes for rituals, and experimented with balms meant to enhance meditation. Some even dabbled in memory tonics. Weird tidbit, a 12th century convent journal describes a potion for clarity before Vespers that included powdered acorns, mint, and wine boiled with fig sap. The same entry warns, "Take not on Thursdays, lest visions increase." Historians still debate whether some of these potions were genuinely efficacious or simply ritual acts with placebo power. But as Sister Bridget once wrote, "What comforts the soul comforts the body." You stir the potion and the room responds, not dramatically, but a sigh escapes the stones. Or maybe it was you. The sister offers you a tiny cup. You hesitate. Not because you're afraid, but because the air itself feels thick with punctuation, a comma between one kind of time and another. You sip. It tastes like lavender and old honey, and something faintly metallic like the memory of rain on bells. The candlelight dims not out of weakness, but out of knowing when to bow. You breathe in, you breathe out. The convent holds its breath with you. Midnight is a velvet hush stretched across the convent like a blanket sewn by centuries. You walk slowly now, not because you're tired, but because the stones beneath your feet ask for gentleness. They've held generations of footsteps, and yours is just one more whisper in a long lullaby. The hallways glow in candlelight, flickering gently, as if they too are nodding off. A moth flutters near a sconce, its wings making a sound softer than paper. Somewhere in the distance, a door creaks open, not ominously, just old, and then creaks closed again, like a page being turned in a dream. The sisters are in their rooms, their prayers complete, but 1 or 2 still move in the shadows, robes brushing softly against stone. You pass Sister Elodia as she carries a bundle of dried sage. She nods. You nod. Words aren't needed anymore. Tonight is the last night of the waxing moon, and there is a quiet anticipation in the air, as if the world is leaning in, waiting to exhale. You reach the old observatory at the edge of the garden. It's not much, just a round room with a domed ceiling open to the stars. But to the nuns, it's always been a sacred place, not for science, but for stillness. You lie on the cool stone floor. No one stops you. No one needs to. Major historical fact. In some medieval convents, nuns practiced a form of celestial contemplation, where they would gaze at the stars in silence, believing that heaven wrote its moods in constellations. These moments often accompanied medicinal fasts and moon-based rituals. Obscure cultural tidbit. One convent required that every sister write 1 sentence about the moon each week, never to be read aloud, only archived. Scholars found the collection centuries later and called it the quietest diary. Historians still debate whether these moon-viewing sessions were officially sanctioned or simply tolerated as a form of mystical rebellion. You close your eyes, and the dome above you feels infinite. A bell chimes once, not from the chapel, but from within. Perhaps it's your own heart now slowed to the rhythm of the convent. The stars rearrange themselves just slightly like they're adjusting their shawls. You feel time pooling gently around you, not rushing, not stopping, just resting. And now the bells are still. The convent sleeps. The fig trees have folded their branches like arms at peace. Nothing presses forward anymore. Nothing tugs at you. The world, so old, so wide, so full, has paused just long enough to let your breath settle. You are still in the observatory, though the stars might have changed positions a dozen times by now. Or maybe they haven't. Maybe they've been watching you the way the sisters watch tea leaves patiently, with reverence as if every flicker of your chest rising and falling were a kind of scripture. Somewhere a candle has burned out. You don't hear it. But you feel the absence of its flame like the end of a song that never needed words. Your hands are warm. Your feet are still. Your thoughts have begun to slow their turning, like wheels gliding to a stop at the end of a gentle ride. The stone beneath you, once cool, has accepted your shape. You are part of the garden now, part of the walls, part of the silence. Tonight the sisters will wake before sunrise. They will gather their herbs, press their tinctures, write their moon sentences. Life will carry on in its quiet rhythm, and you, wherever you are, will carry a sliver of that stillness with you. You don't need to remember every detail, just the peace, just the softness, just the way the night asked nothing of you and still gave you everything. So rest now. Let the fig trees dream, let the potions steep, let the stars take your worries and place them in a jar labeled already handled. Good night, quiet traveler. Sleep gently, sleep long, sleep like the moon is watching over you, because in this story she is.